Michella Chester here with NCAA Digital. I've got Adam Kramer back with me again, a college football senior writer for Bleacher Report. Adam, I've got to give you the biggest kudos of all because you picked Georgia to win the national championship almost a year in advance. I don't think you get enough credit for that.
Well, thank you. And when I'm wrong, this year and the years after that, let's remember the one that we got right. But yeah, with all the changes, especially in college football, Georgia delivered and incredible amounts of talent, incredible coaching, all of it. For once, the prediction worked out. Again, I want to get that out there here before I make a lot of bad ones.
Right. Well, as you just mentioned, we're going to do way too early predictions and preview for 2022 now, literally 2 days after the national championship. So, heading into 2022, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. These things are going to change in a day's time. But what are your biggest storylines for 2022?
I think and maybe people have SEC fatigue, obviously, an SEC national championship game, two teams from it. But I think the SEC is wild. And I'm really interested to see if the balance of power, Alabama and Georgia, will stay that way. But you talk about Texas A&M with its recruiting class. You look at Brian Kelly coming in. You look at changes at Florida. You look at teams like Tennessee that had a really nice year and did some really nice things. And again, I'm leaving Arkansas, who had a tremendous year. So I'm wondering, and we're going to talk about it. You have Alabama and you have Georgia that are going to be expected to do big things once again. And yet the firepower of that conference really is tremendous. And what will Brian Kelly do with immense expectations? And can they push that? And is this the year? Texas A&M is a team that I pushed, by the way. If I'm going to say I'm right about Georgia, I was wrong about Texas A&M, and yet the talent is there. So I really do think it starts with that conference and how these major players are going to react in the offseason and beyond.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're going to touch on it more here. This is going to change. As I said, we don't even know all of the information yet on who's coming back. So much factors that factor in. But who are some of the top names in 2022 that we should watch out for? Heisman candidates? Can Bryce Young repeat?
I think Bryce Young can repeat, but honestly, and the more I watch, I think Will Anderson Jr., if you're like me and you want a defensive player to win the Heisman, I think Will Anderson is going to have one of the best and biggest campaigns we've seen for a defensive player heading into a season. That's important, right? Defensive players, when they're going to win this award, I think it starts week 4, week 5, like, wow, this person's doing some amazing things. There's a lot of people, including myself, that have watched Bama games this year, and he was the best player on the field and the best player in the country. And then, of course, Bryce Young is going to be there. And look, C.J. Stroud was really close, right? Really close. And he loses his wide receivers. Well, guess what? Ohio State is going to have more of them. So when you look at that team, that offense, that conference, the way he's going to be able to put up stats, like at the start of the season, C.J. Stroud looked hesitant. He struggled a little bit early on in games. Like his growth was incredible. And as long as he stays healthy and continues that, I think statistically speaking, he is going to be overwhelming. So in some ways, the Heisman, you're going to pick up where you left. Like it's a little bit of a different year, and familiar faces, Young, Stroud, and again, Anderson. And let's hope the defensive player wins it. I think those guys are going to be right there.
So this year, Adam, we kind of had a unique year. I mean, Cincinnati made history making it to the college football playoff. Michigan earned its first CFP berth. Clemson fell off the map. We had so many different teams in the mix. How do you see that continuing into 2022? And are there any under the radar teams you can see sneaking in next year?
Of course, and we hope so, right? It's fun to have new faces in this thing, but I think the team that really impressed me is Baylor. There's a certain physicality, the way that defense played. Dave Aranda, who's got this Zen-like approach about him, it is so different. I think they play in the right conference. I think they can, they're going to lose some people, obviously, but they get back some of their offensive pieces, especially at quarterback. And defensively, I love watching them play. And I think the Big 12 with the changes at Oklahoma, of course, Oklahoma State loses its starting defensive coordinator. It could be the good positioning. And we have to talk about this team, USC, right? You talk about changes and disclaimers, who's going to be the quarterback? What's this team going to look like? This is a team with talent. And again, it plays in a conference where they should win a lot of games. The impact of Lincoln Riley, it's going to be one of the bigger offseason storylines. It's going to be significant. Can they make that jump to the playoff? That might be a bit aggressive, but it wouldn't shock me to see just a completely remade program and one that competes for a conference title.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I hate to do this to you, and I make you do it every year. Last year it paid off. You picked Georgia as your number one
Yes.
team, but let's have your top 5 teams going into 2022.
It's tough. It's tough, and it's not definitive. But number one for me is Alabama. They're going to lose a lot of really good players. They do this every year. I think the one thing about this year is you had young players step up, and Bryce Young and Will Anderson. I mean, maybe the two best players in college football on both sides of the ball, and Nick Saban. Right? Alabama's going to earn the benefit of the doubt. They almost won a national championship with 2,000-yard receivers injured. It was pretty amazing what they've done. Number 2 for me is still Georgia. Now, we talk about an exodus of talent. Kobe Dean, Jordan Davis, James Cook, others, right? As we're filming this, we're going to figure out exactly what the losses are. But this roster is wild. It is wild. It is 4 stars and 5 stars. And I think the thing to watch will be quarterback. You've got Bennett. You've got some really good young players. JT Daniels is still there. Who knows? I know this. Georgia is going to be back into that position again. Ohio State is my number 3 team. Again, Olave, Garrett Wilson. We know that they're not going to be back. They're going to lose other pieces as well. But when you have the wide receivers that they do, when you have the quarterback, and when you have a defense that's actually really young, and I think going to be wildly improved, especially a defensive line that I thought underperformed a little bit this year, I think they're going to be considerably better. Number 4, Texas A&M. I'm going to do it.
All right.
This is a defense, and I did this kind of last year, so we know where that's going. But this is a defense that was not to Georgia's level, but was really close, really close. They lost their starting quarterback early. They've stockpiled wide receivers. They've got impact players in this recruiting class that's coming in. I think they're going to be great. I really like Jimbo Fisher. Again, the problem with them, we talked about it, is the conference. The competition is so high, so they just can't lose the types of games they did. And the last one for me is Clemson. Clemson very quietly salvaged their season. I mean, this was a team we gave up on, a team that was in my top 5 last year. They got to find a way to manufacture more points on offense. That is a concern. They lost both their coordinators, longtime coordinators. That's a concern. But defensively, great. And this is a team that was injured a lot. Brian Breesy, other really good players, young players injured. To rebound the way they did, a lot of turnover in Clemson. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Playing in that conference, they get back and they find a way to make the playoff.
All right, so we're calling for a Clemson comeback. Lastly, let's look ahead and give us something to look forward to. What are your most exciting matchups very early in 2022?
Yeah, and look, the conference games will always deliver. I could say Ohio State, Michigan. I could say all those things, but the out-of-conference games early is where the sport is thriving. Ohio State, Notre Dame is hugely compelling, and if you are an NFL scout, whether you're scouting Notre Dame's tight end, whether you're scouting C.J. Stroud, there's going to be great talent all over the field, and also just in terms of brand power. Right. That's a hugely interesting game that's going to come early. Brand power. Speaking of Alabama, Texas. Right. This game, we've seen a national championship, at least for me, who's older. I remember that game vividly with Colt McCoy going down. So maybe Texas is going to try and get its revenge. Obviously, this is a tall order for Texas, who has recruited well. We're potentially will be playing a young quarterback in this game that we're going to see for the first time. It's a big momentum game, but a tall order for Texas. And yet I can't help it. It's Alabama, Texas. You have to include that. And I guess the last one would be Georgia, Oregon. Now, this is fascinating, a variety of fronts. Dan Lanning is now the Oregon head coach, DC for Georgia, out there probably recruiting as we record this. But I think ultimately that the familiarity is huge. And yet it's going to be a huge measuring stick to see what type of team Georgia has returning. And for Oregon, a team in transition, a team that lost a lot of players to injury and obviously now breaking in a new head coach. Again, fun, cross-country, out-of-conference games, which we absolutely love.
Well, Adam, this is always so much fun. I know it's way too early, but we love doing it. As always, thank you so much for joining me.
Okay, when I'm dead wrong next year, you're allowed to say it too. That's
right.
Fine. You can say when I'm right. You can also tell me when I'm wrong. So all good there.
All right. Thank you, Adam.